Okay. Yeah, it's just another busy day.
Yeah, no kidding.
Alrighty. So Zoom caps out at 40 minutes, as I'm sure you're well aware. If for whatever reason we are like, oh, they were in the middle of a great discussion point and we need to like stop and drop and then join the call again and keep going, we can just do that. I can splice things together, no problem.
Sounds good.
But yeah, tried using the other tech for the last recording I did, and it was fine, except that I sounded like I was in a box. So I'm hoping, casual glance at the mixer here, I'm hoping my settings are a lot better this time. Yeah, we ought to be all right. Okay, cool. Well, welcome back to another episode of Scouting Stuff. You've got two of us today. I continue to be Scouter Ken, and coming at you from halfway across the country of Canada and the other side of the internet, we have with us Ethan. So, hi Ethan, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ethan Goodneys. Like Ken said, I'm a scouter out in Paris, Ontario, just south of Toronto. I've been in Scouts since I was a first-year Beaver, so about 18 years now. And right now, I'm the head of contingent for the World Scout Moot, which is happening next summer in July and August 2025.
Brilliant. And hey, cheers to, being a first-year Beaver. You just join and then you never really leave. And it's like, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Scouting is one of those things where if you stick with it long enough, it just sort of sticks in your life forever.
Yep.
Which I find is great. It creates that community.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's my story. It's my daughter's stories. It's a good thing. Alrighty. So now you reached out, well, a while ago, and of course it's, my own fault that I didn't follow up with that sooner, and I apologize, but fortunately, none of the international events have happened yet. We're just coming off of 2023, which saw a number of international events. WJ, obviously, that went interestingly. The Haarlem Jamboree, Kandersteg, Kiss, Kander 100, which I was at. And then there's been like some smaller jamborees kind of across 2024. I think there was an Iceland one, probably some others I'm forgetting. Now you mentioned one, the international or the World Rover Moot, which is that January? Or when is
July.
That? July.
Yeah, it's coming up. July 25th is the first day of 23rd, excuse me. July 23rd, 2025 is the first day, and it ends on the 5th of August.
Brilliant. And where's that one taking place?
Just outside of Porto, in Portugal.
Oh.
So there's actually two components to the moot itself. So if people decide to come as participants, they actually get to participate in two elements. The first element is called paths, where they go around with their patrol and get to experience a different part of the country. So depending on what path they're with, they might be going into Lisbon and seeing a lot of museums and stuff like that. Or if they're, in a more adventurous group, they might be going to the Azores Islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and going on a lot of hikes and seeing the community. And with that comes the aspect of community service, which is really big for this World Moot. So youth will have a chance to participate in the event, but also give back to local communities. And then the second half of the Moot is taking place just outside of Ovar, which is about an hour away from Porto, on the main campsite, which participants will have an opportunity to visit Espinho, Porto, and Ovar as part of sort of daily excursions. There's also leadership workshops and different, about 265 different activities to participate in across the main camp, as well as outside of the camp in different areas of the country. So it's going to be a really exciting event, and my team and I are really, really excited to see a really big Canadian contingent so far attend this event.
How many are going in overall?
So we have space for 150. Right now we're at 108 registered.
Wow.
So if people listening are interested in going to the World Scout Moot, now's a chance to get registered for it.
Yeah, well, and you know what? Hey, if you have like a sign-up link, a website people can hit to express interest, we'll make sure that we include that in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will have to get that from you. I'm just, this might be my own misspent youth and misspent time as a rover talking, but I find it slightly funny that we're going to send a bunch of 18 to 26-year-olds for a week plus stint in the fortified wine capital of the world.
Yeah, that's definitely
Not,
something that
not sure who
has been
thought that one
mentioned.
up, but
That has definitely been something that's mentioned. And you know what? I think there's a lot more to do in Porto and in Portugal than just drink wine. Certainly, that's something that you can do outside of the mood if participants choose to stay a little bit extra. Um, but Portugal and its sort of overseas holdings are incredible,
oh,
absolutely
absolutely.
gorgeous. I've been twice now, and I can only say positive things about Portugal, and I can only say positive things about this move. As of right now, it's looking like it's going to be fantastic. It's a great opportunity for youth and adults to sort of meet people from all over the world. There's going to be 7,500 scouts and scouters from all over the world there. And our ambassador to Portugal might make a stop by. So if you
Oh,
have an interest meeting our ambassador to Portugal, um, you know, you know where to find us.
yeah. And and this is actually maybe a really good pivot point, or a really good opportunity to just kind of pivot into the wider topic. Because as we were going back and forth by email initially, of course, you had mentioned the moot as being the thing that you were like attending and running contingent for. But then, you had suggested maybe like branching out into sort of a wider discussion of international opportunities, which, I think would be great. And maybe just at kind of maybe just as a stepping stone into that, because we've kind of danced around the idea a little bit here, or we've kind of alluded to the to what a moot is. But maybe let's start with just the concept of a moot, because in a way it is very like any other jamboree, with one key difference, and that is that it is specifically focused on rover aged youth. Like I said, that 18 to 26 set, um, varies a little bit by country, obviously, what the exact age category for rovers will be. But yeah, so a moot. What is a moot?
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. It is an event specifically for sort of more senior youth. So 18 to 25 is usually the age range. There's a lot of them out there. There's, for example, Rover Way out in Norway that runs every 3 years, I believe. And there's also the World Scout Moot, a bunch of other ones. And they're specifically targeted for senior youth in the scouting program, allowing them to sort of establish more international relationships with both scouts and the scouting movement in general, and sort of expose more youth that may not have had the chance as, younger participants, as scouts, as cubs, or as venturers, to sort of jump into the world of international scouting as an adult and experience international scouting at a different level. And with that comes every rover moot is very, very vastly different. For example, the previous World Scout Moot was held in Iceland in 2013, and there was alcoholic drinking allowed at that event. At this one, it's not allowed, but every single event that is organized for rovers is entirely different. And I'm a little bit of a scouting history nerd, so I'll give a little bit of a historical tangent
Oh,
about,
absolutely.
the first World Scout Moot was actually held in Norway, and there was no drinking allowed, but there's an old, perhaps old wives' tale about how the tents from the participants were so filled up with cigarette smoke because everyone was smoking, that you couldn't see 3 feet in front of you. Obviously, that's totally different from the scouting of today, and that won't be happening at our World Scout Moot. But it's a great opportunity for adults. I'm a rover myself, going to these world events and being able to experience world scouting when you may not have had the chance as a youth, right? For me, for example, I wasn't able to go to the World Scout Jamboree in Virginia nor Korea, just simply because I was either working or, I couldn't afford it.
Hmm.
But this event is significantly cheaper in terms of, the cost up front to go to the event. And it allows you to sort of experience international scouting at your own pace as well. So the great thing about World Scout Moots in particular, but most moots, is that you can arrive before or after very early, or stay very late after the event and actually travel afterwards or beforehand
Hmm.
to see the different sites depending on where the country is. So for example, we have a number of participants in this moot that are actually going to France after the moot happens in Portugal to go visit different museums, go see Paris, that kind of thing. And myself, I'm actually working on research for my day job in Amsterdam
Ah,
after the moot. So it's kind of killing two birds with one stone, but it allows you to sort of travel wherever the moot is happening.
right. Yeah. Well, I think the other part about the moot concept that I like, because I mean, my first, well, I mean, I went to, let's see, I did an Alberta, well, I did a Canadian Jamboree as a participant. I was a venturer. And then I worked for I did an Alberta Jamboree, or an Alberta-based Jamboree at any rate. It wasn't called AJ, as an offer of service. 2007 was actually like the first time I'd left Canada ever, period. And that ended up being twice, the second time for my honeymoon and the first time for WJ 2007, the centenary. And what, and I mean, I went to that one as an offer of service too. And don't get me wrong. Going to a World Jamboree in any capacity is amazing. Like the relationships you forge, the people you meet, the experience you have, whether you are helping run an event or taking part as a participant in the event, outstanding. Like one of those, yeah, second to none kind of things. But it is a very different experience to run an event at a jamboree versus go around and take part in a bunch of different events at a jamboree. And so one thing I like about the moot concept, because usually when we're talking about rover-aged youth going to international events, they're either going as scouters, uh, possibly, or they're going as offers of service, volunteers helping to run the event, bring it to life. And, you know, not to knock that at all. That is an absolutely wonderful thing to do, and you will have a blast doing it. But it is kind of cool that moots exist to sort of allow that older set to recapture, or maybe, like you say, experience for the first time the participant experience of, you know, a jamboree type event. Because it is,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it is exactly how you said it. It's also an opportunity. Moot, I sort of oversimplified before, but moot is really an entirely different experience. There's a lot more activities that are geared towards, adults rather than towards, 14, 15, 16 year olds. And so when you're going there, you're treated as an adult, right? Like me as head of contingent, I'm not going to, provide you with all of the information as to how to get everywhere. You're going to have to figure out, how to get from, the airport to the opening ceremony location, for example. But that provides you the opportunity of traveling on your own, perhaps for the first time. But it also provides you that experience of, meeting new people, meeting people in airports. And one of my favorite examples of this is my good friend Jason Gingrich and I attended the Inter-American leadership training in 2019, and we were both traveling from Toronto to Panama City, and we had a layover in Texas, and we actually met up with three different Scoutmasters from Scouts BSA, now Scouting America, which allowed us to sort of discuss, what scouting looked like in Canada and that kind of thing. And that's exactly what Moot provides for rovers, is that opportunity not only to, make new friends internationally, but to, meet different people, get new perspectives on scouting. If you're a section scouter as well as a rover, perhaps even get, new activities for your youth to do, get new program ideas, or even create new travel goals, which is a lot easier to do when you're, internationally talking to people from all over the world and say, hey, I might come to Australia, for example, for a week. Can I stay in your backyard in a tent? And oftentimes they'll say, yeah, I'll stay with you in the backyard in a tent. And you get to experience scouting in a multitude of different ways. And Moot also provides an opportunity for us as Canadians, but everyone around the world, to share our culture with people that may not have the opportunity to come to Canada. And that provides an excellent opportunity for Canada because we're so unique with that myriad of and diversity of cultural beliefs and expressions to sort of share what Canada looks like to people that may not be able to afford to come to Canada or are not planning on coming to Canada, to sort of give them that intro that might, inspire them to come to a new scouting event like the Pacific Jamboree.
That point about diversity and being able to share like Canadian culture with others reminded me of a couple of things that we did at Candorsteg. I don't know if the World Rover Moot has this. I think it's becoming more of a thing now with jamborees, but there was at Candor 100 there was like, yeah, that cultural day, right, where all the different national contingents were supposed to like do whatever they wanted to rep their country, rep its culture. And so, I mean, I had weeks prior to us even leaving, I had put out a Google form and basically was just from all the contingent was just collecting, okay, just give me your songs, like Canadian artists, Canadiana, give me your songs. So I put it together as an Apple playlist and then converted it to a Spotify playlist as well. So that was great to like just have all these tunes across a bunch of different musical genres jamming. But we had one of our scouters that came along brought with her some of the props necessary for and the instructions for how to play a variety of games that I guess are sort of like, culturally sort of significant games for the Inuit community in Canada. And that was cool. And then we had somebody from the Swedish contingent, like the Swedish contingent came to visit us. And one of their scouters pulled us aside and she's like, so just so you know, like in my day job, I'm an anthropologist. And we see these same games in like the history of like Norse culture, like, kind of Viking, pre-Viking culture. It's like, really? Well, there's an interesting thought, isn't it? So not only do you get the chance to like share aspects of your own culture, but all of a sudden you might find like, oh, well, there's only one way that makes sense. And I would have never even thought about that,
Yeah, it is. It is really interesting. And one of the things that, we do have that international night available at the World Scout Moot. One of the things that we're trying to decide as a team is what we're going to do for that activity component. One thing that I find is really cool is that we have so many youth in this contingent that are able to suggest different elements that we can include in our international night. And that might be, similar to that, instructions on how to play traditional Inuit games or traditional, Ojibwe games or things like that, which is fantastic. I think the other opportunity too is we can share cultural expressions from communities that don't necessarily fall into the traditional Eurocentrism of Canadian society. So as we all know, Canada is made up of a community of immigrants. And so, there's Anglo and Scottish traditions in Canada for certain, but there's also, Punjab and Taiwanese and, Chinese expressions that we can embrace as Canadians to say, these are traditional games from some of our community members too. And it gives us an opportunity to show the world that sort of multiculturalism is part of our national pride as Canadian Scouts. And one way we're doing that is by sort of allowing, there's actually a fashion show component to the international night organized by the Moot. And one of the things that we're encouraging our participants to do is, if you follow a particular cultural belief or a religious belief, bring some traditional clothing and sort of participate in this, because Canada isn't, jeans, a plaid shirt, and an axe like a lumberjack. It's made up of every single different cultural expression and cultural outfit. And so that's one way we're sort of encouraging that sort of cultural diversity and cultural expression in Canada. And I think it is really challenging when we talk about bigger contingents like at the World Scout Jamboree or, KISC, for example. It's challenging to get expressions from every single community in Canada, albeit that's impossible for us as Scouts. We don't have representatives from every community that's represented in Canadian population, but doing our best to sort of express, Canada's multiculturalism is something that we're really focusing on as a contingent. And I know that other contingent heads are also focusing on this, simply because it's important for us as Canadians to recognize that there's, not just one Canadian culture. I was walking down through downtown Paris this morning, and I remember growing up, there was one Chinese food place, and now there's a shawarma place and a falafel place, and an Indian cuisine place, and that sort of reminds me that there is that cultural diversity in Canada that we as scouts and as well as international travelers, need to embrace and sort of put forward into the international community.
It would almost be fascinating in that circumstance to, to watch for the deltas too, right? So like, you have, say, the Canadian, I'll just pick a country out of air. Let's say, India and Hindu culture, right? So, it'd be interesting to like, if there was a contingent from India that was also representing, aspects of Hindu culture, it'd be interesting to see like where the similarities, and I'm sure there would be many, with the Canadian Hindu, where the similarities are, but also what if any notable deltas would be there, right? Like that's where I get fascinated by it, is because you're right. Like Canada does sort of, bring in all corners of the world, and it would be interesting to see, because it's kind of like, if you're the part about traveling internationally that I like the most is being away from Alberta long enough and being around people who are not from Alberta long enough that I can start to pick out my own accent, and it would just be really interesting to see, like, I think it would be interesting to see, like, if there was any sort of evidence of like, okay, so like that is, this representation of culture, and then here is this representation of culture filtered through a Canadian lens. And what does that look like? And where are the little subtleties of difference there? Like, I think that would be interesting to see, right? Because that's kind of, in a way, that's almost where like the Canadianness emerges, right? Is like, okay, well, what are those little subtle differences?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But anyways, so that is the moot. And I always love that we call it a moot, because it's like the most, in my, and I know the word is even older than this, but of course in my head, I go back to Tolkien, right? And the Entmoot and all of that stuff, right? And it's always felt like it's such an archaic word. And I don't use that in a bad way, right? But it's an old word. And it kind of has a very specific meaning, which I think the spirit of a moot really captures, right? Which is, like you say, it's a gathering from far, far away of many, many disparate ideas and peoples and experiences to just come together and share in all of that. And it's just awesome that way.
For sure. And the actual term, the World Scout Moot, and I might be mistaken, but I believe I read in some source somewhere that Entmoot is sort of the inspiration or quasi-inspiration for, the term rover moot, because that was sort of popularized by Tolkien during the years where he was writing The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, which is super fascinating to see this sort of development between, fantasy fiction and scouting sort of working tangentially together.
And that's kind of the mark of great literature, right? I mean, how many words that we use today did Shakespeare invent, right? Like, how much did Shakespeare contribute to the English lexicon, right?
Yeah.
So similar idea. But yeah, so that's and I mean, again, it's a grand term for what actually happens. Not that jamboree is a bad term, because jamboree kind of implies much more. It's a much more celebratory word, right? It's it's kind of like right up there with like party. And so of course we have the moots, which really do focus on the older sections, the rovers. And then of course the other major international event, as we've alluded to a few times here, the jamboree. Now I'm trying to think the only jamboree I can think of off the top of my head, I think there's supposed to be one in Australia in early 2025.
Yeah, so the Australian Jamboree is taking place, I believe, second or third week in January, in just sort of in the middle of the country outside of Adelaide.
Yeah, I know at one point some people in my group had been talking about maybe going to that, but I think we kind of with having sent a small contingent to Canada 100 and a much larger contingent to HJ, I think everybody was just kind of in like jamboree burnout mode. So I don't think we're going to that one, but it is kind of funny to see like all of these little regional jamborees pop up. Like I said, there was the Icelandic jamboree earlier this year, the Australian one coming up. Are there any other ones in 2025? I can't think off the top of my head, but there probably are.
There are a ton, and I can't think of as many as you, but we have the American Jamboree coming up in the summer.
Mm.
We also have, for example, the Kent Jamboree out in the UK.
Oh yeah.
There's others for more senior scouters. So Gilwell Reunion, for example, is a jamboree for Gilwellians, which happens I think it's the first weekend in September every year at
Mm.
Gilwell Park in the UK. So there's a lot. There's so many jamborees that you know Canadians can attend simply because Scouts Canada is part of the World Organization for the Scouting Movement.
Yep.
But international scouting isn't necessarily just attending these huge events organized by WASM or whatever. It's also about participating in the international community of which Scouts Canada is a member, and that could be as simple as just going to a local group camp in the US. If you're from Windsor, Ontario, for example, I know many groups participate in sort of cross-border exchange programs or camping activities with groups in Detroit. I myself attended a jamboree in Pennsylvania, and a number of scouting groups from the US come up here for a number of events out at Camp Bell in Dorchester, Ontario, or up in Camp Attawandaron in near Lake Huron in Ontario, and I'm sure there's many others across the country. And it's a great opportunity, to focus on what differences there are between the different scout groups and the different ways that they work, but also it creates an opportunity for your youth to create those experiences at a smaller rate, at a smaller international sort of scale, personalizing their international scouting experiences. And we do have that
Absolutely.
benefit as Canadians, being so close to the United States, to just sort of, establish those connections. And perhaps if you live in the northern parts of the provinces, it may not be as easy to sort of exchange international scouting with people from the US or from other parts of the country. But there are a myriad of opportunities to participate in online events. So Jamboree on the Air, Jamboree on the Internet are
Yep.
both opportunities to experience international scouting at sort of a uh, from the comfort of your own home or from the comfort of a scout hut or wherever you can get on the air with a ham radio. And there's a lot of opportunities that do cost money, but there's also opportunities that you can do pen pal programs or things like that allow you to sort of contribute to your youth or youth contribute to their own international experiences.
Mhm.
Then there's the other topic of international service projects, which I know a number of groups are doing over the next few years, including a service trip to Costa Rica. I believe there's one planned for Kenya in 2026. And that's simply going to a community or organizing with the community a way to give back to the international community, which is a part of what scouting is community service.
Yep.
And so international scouting is also that as well. It's giving back to the community. So there's a ton of different ways of looking at how scouting works in sort of the international lens of things. And there's a lot of opportunities to participate in however you want to do it. And I think that that's what's really great about an international scouting experience is that you can sort of jump in wherever you'd like to go.
I want to come back to a couple of things there too, because I mean, you mentioned Jamboree on the Air, Jamboree on the Internet, which was a couple of weekends ago now. Um, and I mean, I love that one. Like that is a grand fun time. But I think the one thing that I always try to stress, and I think that folks at ScoutLink would prefer that more people try to stress this, is that yes, Jamboree on the air, Jamboree on the internet, that one weekend is definitely when you're going to see like the most number of people taking part in that online event. But the actual technical framework for the event doesn't go away. Um, Actually, this year they expanded it a little bit. They rolled out so normally Jamboree on the internet, like Jamboree on the air, shortwave and ham radios, which granted is not my scene, but I mean, there are many people who are still enthusiastic about such things. I'm more of the internet guy, Jamboree on the internet. Uh, and traditionally, the main ways that that's been rolled out have been through IRC and through TeamSpeak and Minecraft servers. Because ScoutLink, which is like the official partner organization that WASM uses for JOTI, their big thing is, and one of the reasons they don't use Discord is because they can't run it on their own hardware. They really want full control of the stack all the way down to the bare metal, for moderation reasons and a bunch of other reasons. So there is another organization that does use Discord, but ScoutLink, the official partner, does not. But one thing they did add this year was Rocket Chat, which is, another self-hostable chat service. It's a little more Discord-like compared to IRC, but regardless, it's not like they turn the servers off once the weekend wraps up. Their Minecraft servers run 24/7. Their TeamSpeak servers, the IRC servers, the Rocket Chat servers run 24/7, 365. So yeah, there is always the opportunity there to log on and see who else is logging on and connecting from wherever else in the world they might be. Which is also to say, take advantage of that, log on, see who's on. I mean, the ScoutLink servers can be very quiet when it isn't JOTI, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, right? Like it would be cool if that was something that more people trafficked more regularly, because yeah, the opportunities for, like you say, exchanging ideas, having these great conversations. I ran the JOTI component at the local camp here. And I mean, you wander into the youth servers and it's random, it's stream of consciousness, but sometimes in the middle of all that, I would find that like the scouts, whoever they were coming through the rotation they'd zero in on like one or two people, and in and amidst all the noise, they'd be having this really deep conversation. And it's like, see, like that's why right there. The other thing that I've always tried to encourage, and again, like this is like, we're talking like coming down from the macro to the micro now, is if you out there listening, like if you ever have an opportunity to travel anywhere, this is something that I've done. This is something I've encouraged other people in my group to do, and some of them have just picked it up and run with it. I don't travel too much outside Canada anymore. The parameters of my work have changed such that I don't have to get on a plane near as much as I used to. But whenever I did have to get on a plane, the first thing I would do is I would like hit Facebook and I would hit the internet, and this, like I would try and search out scout groups in the areas that I'd be going to. And then I try and reach out to them, get in touch with them, figure out when they're meeting, because they almost always are like super stoked to, oh, you're a scout from another country, please come in, right? And you can have all sorts of weird and wonderful experiences. And Scouts Canada can back you up on that. Like sometimes, depending on which country it is, they might ask for what's called letter recommendation. So, every time I go, the Americans don't usually ask for this. The Irish did. But regardless, it's just kind of my process now is, okay, I'm going here. Cool. Find a couple of groups, reach out, make contact my council, get my letter of recommendation, get on the plane, make sure my uniform's in my luggage, and then just, show up in full kit at, the prescribed time and place and see what they're getting up to. It is a fascinating way to, and again, everything you mentioned there, Ethan, see how they do scouting, share with them how we do scouting, come back with ideas, come back with new games that you can play, just all kinds of weird and wonderful stuff.
Absolutely. And I used to live in France for a stint when I was working for the federal government. And one of the things I did, just sort of out of habit, is I threw, my Necker and Woggle and Gilwilliam beads into my bag, not thinking that I would use them at all when I was in France, but I just sort of brought them with me. And one of the weekends I decided to go out to the Palace of Versailles to, see the sights and do all the touristy stuff.
As you do.
I was walking through the town there, And, I saw a giant group of scouts. They were all wearing their full scout regalia and all that kind of good stuff. And so I sort of went up to the scout leaders and introduced myself and, explained what I was doing there and put on my necker and sort of met a few scouts. And it's something so simple as just having, your necker or even just a WUSM badge on the backpack that you bring with you when you travel internationally. That can really just change how people see you when you travel, or change your experiences entirely. A lot of different people asked me if I was a scout, and then recommended different places to go if I wanted to see different cool hiking spots or different cool camping spots or things like that.
Ah,
And I've been really fortunate to be able to travel in such a way for work that I can have those experiences and be able to see different parts of the world that my family has never seen, and be able to sort of share my scouting experiences with other scouts sort of on an impromptu basis. Um, and that's a great thing about scouts, is that it's international in nature. So it's a fantastic program to be able to do that.
it really is amazing just how, especially if, you've been doing the scouting thing for a while, right? Um, when I first started dating my wife, um, she would always tease me about the fact that, like I'd be at family functions. She's a very large, very boisterous family, and I love them to pieces. But she would kind of tease me about the fact that it's like, oh, you're such a wallflower at family events. And I absolutely was. I didn't really talk to a lot of people because I'm not actually that particularly extroverted. I'm kind of reserved, kind of introverted. Um, but then the second part of it was, she'd be like, but you can walk into a room full of scouts you don't know, and you're just like a totally different person. And there is something to that because, and it's the same like with your experience with the French scouts, right? It's like you're starting with something not just in common, but like something deeply in common. And there's like this instant air of familiarity, and like, barriers just kind of get stripped away a little bit when you're in that situation. And so, yeah, whereas you might, if you were just walking up to some random person in France, you'd be a lot more reserved. But because you've got the neckerchief on, they've got their neckerchiefs and uniforms on, and there's that, you have a bridge, and all of a sudden some of that reservation just kind of melts away, and you can just commiserate, and you can just have a really great conversation, maybe even just take part in the fun. And it just almost seems to come naturally because, you've been doing this since you were 5, 6. And it really does, if you've been in it that long, especially, it really does, like you said at the outset of this, it just becomes a really core component of you, that you find it very easy to then share in when you meet other people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to think of it as, if you're traveling, oftentimes to a country that doesn't necessarily, for example, speak English, um, and hearing someone speak English, you automatically perk up your ears and go, oh, where are you from?
Yeah.
And for me, that's what it's like when we talk about international scouting in this context. It's easier to go up to someone, who's wearing a uniform or who has a WUSM badge on their backpack or something like that and say, oh, I'm a scout too. Where are you from? Than it is to, go up to a stranger and say, hey, are you a scout? It is complicated because, oftentimes scouts from other countries don't know, the same lingo, or there's a little bit of a language barrier there. But to be honest with you, I've never had a bad experience where scouts have come up to me, whether I was in uniform or not, and said, hey, are you a scout? And we sit down and have oftentimes an hour and a half, 2 hour long conversation, simply because we both have that sort of cultural understanding with scouts. And I do truly think that scouting is a culture, on its own, internationally, and both nationally and internationally, I should say, which allows us to sort of see different parts of the world that you wouldn't necessarily be able to if you weren't a scout or you weren't involved in scouting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess, the other part of that is if I know that I'm going international, and I'm going to be meeting scouts, I always bring extra neckerchiefs. It's like my one rule. It's like, just bring extra neckerchiefs. Um, I know we talk about badge trading a lot, and to be fair, badge trading is a lot of fun too. And actually, like all the times I've gone and visited Scouts BSA, like you say now, Scouting America troops in the past, I've come back with just bags full of badges, some of which are really, really awesome. Like the Scouting for Food Campbell's soup can badge is among my favorites. Uh-oh, you've frozen. Did I lose you?
Oh,
Nope.
no, it's just my internet.
Okay, no
It
worries.
doesn't like my camera.
I hear you. There you go. Okay, cool. Nope, just making sure. But where's I going? So like I always come back from the US with like lots of badges, and that's great. But yeah, it's like for me, it's the neckerchiefs, and maybe as like another tip for, anybody who does want to take part in these sorts of international events. Like always plan to come back with a couple neckers less than you started with, which means bring extra neckers and teach yourself the friendship knot. Learn the friendship knot.
It is incredibly easy to do the friendship knot. And I will say, it doesn't necessarily have to be a Canadian national necker. I've traded, my group necker, my group commissioner will hate me for this, about 5 or 6 times for, other groups neckers. And it's a great opportunity to just sort of share not only your national culture, your national scouting culture, but also your group scouting culture, because every group is unique in its own scouting experiences.
Yeah.
And one thing that, stands out to me in that respect is I have a good friend who's a scout in Poland. And I just so happen to be doing a trip out to Poland for work. And I said, if you have a scout meeting, I'd love to attend. And so I was able to attend, and they asked me to do a presentation on what scouting looked like in Canada because they wanted to know. And so it was a lot about what scouting looked like in Canada in general, but also what scouting looked like for my group in particular. And, I had lots of pictures from, my time as a venture and the venture company I'm a scouter with now, about what we do in the winter and what's, unique about Canadian scouting. And, a lot was similar with the Polish scouts, but a lot was very, very different. And, it was really fun to see those differences. And, even if, you don't get that opportunity to share, your scouting cultural expression or your scouting cultural experience with another group, you still have that opportunity to sort of meet international scouts and sort of share perhaps a tidbit of your cultural knowledge on scouting. And scouting cultural knowledge, I should say, is different for everyone. For me specifically, I'm a trained historian, so I focus very much on the historical part of scouting culture. But I know, my colleagues with First Paris, they focus more on, the activities that we do or the impactfulness of scouting on one's life as part of, Canadian scouting culture. And so there is, a million unique ways of seeing scouting as its own cultural expression. And I highly encourage everyone listening to sort of find how they express scouting culture and sort of share that not only with international scouting, but also with your youth, with your participants, because they might have a totally different perspective that might help you create new programming or create opportunities for them to grow as people.
Yeah. I mean, I've had many of the same experiences. Like I showed up at one Scouts BSA meeting and apparently I was going to be the focus of the meeting. They just wanted to pepper me for 90 minutes with questions about like scouting in Canada. And that was right around like 2019 when they had just like this was in North Dakota and they had like just launched their first girls troop. Right. And it was the boys troop and then the girls troop that had been chartered alongside it. And they just wanted to like, pepper me about like, questions. Well, what's it like? Because you've had, at that point, female membership in Scouts Canada had been 20 years, 21, 22 years. So, lots of questions about like the badge program and all the rest of it. And so it's like, so you have to show up and be ready for that. But then you also have to, show up and just be ready to roll with whatever happens. Like I walked into this Cub meeting in Ireland and it was kind of right around the end of October. And the scouter in charge, walks up and he hands me a pumpkin. He's just like, I bought this, because it's like almost Halloween. And I bought this. He's like, do you do jack-o'-lanterns in Canada? Because it's not really a thing here. I'm just like, I got you, my man. I got you. Pull out the knife, carve a face in the pumpkin. It's like, you just kind of have to be ready to roll with anything. But it's actually, and now just off the top of my head again, I thought of a game that I'm going to have to play with the scouts tonight. That I also learned in Ireland. I just remembered the rules for it. So it's like, oh yeah, okay, I totally got to show them that because it's been a few years since we busted that one out. But, all of that in a nutshell, right? It's the opportunity to share. It's the opportunity to share scouting, to share Canada, to take something back and use it again. It's, and to forge those really lasting memories. Like I still remember the first time someone taught me the friendship knot, right? Like we had just traded neckers. They tied the friendship knot in the necker they gave me. And like just so many like just powerful little experiences. At the macro level from these big events or conferences or whatever else, at the micro level, individuals, just making the efforts to reach out, whether online or in person when they have an opportunity to go abroad. You're right. Like it's just scouting is this amazing international community that's a little bit different everywhere you find it, but also a lot the same kind of at the fundamental level.
I yeah, I just want to say, there is, I know a lot of people, perhaps a lot of people that are listening today, have gone to international events and sort of have lost touch with a lot of the people they've gone to international events and with. And I can say for certainty that international scouting for me has meant a great deal. So when I attended the Inter-American Leadership Training in 2019, literally a month and a half before the pandemic started, we were able to, meet a lot of people. And one of those people was my good friend, Lindsay Nedrow from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And she was actually one of the first female scouts in Scouting VSA, now Scouting America. And in 2021, when there was a lull in the pandemic, my friend and I, we decided to go visit Lindsay in Lancaster, and we were able to tour, Washington, D.C. and all that kind of good stuff. But the real reason for the visit was that Lindsay was part of the first 100 female Eagle Scouts in American history. And that will forever be one of the most meaningful and important moments in my scouting career, because it was that sort of moment of sort of fulfillment of nearly a lifelong journey for Lindsay and her sister to receive their Eagle Scout Award, which is the highest award for a youth in Scouting America. And I do have to say, you may lose touch with a few people that you go to international events with, and maybe it's not a friendship that lasts for ages. But those friendships that do count, that do matter, that do establish themselves in sort of your life after these international events, they are meaningful. And I really encourage people to go to these events, step a little bit out of your comfort zone. I know it's scary to meet people from other countries and put yourself out there. But it's a great way to sort of establish those new connections. And who knows, maybe you'll have an experience like that where, you get to travel to a different country and see the way they live, the way that they experience, their lives and their understanding of the present in that country. And for us, it was 2021 in the US. It was a challenging time in the US. And, it was a great way for us to understand, the challenges that existed for Americans, because as, we're from Ontario, we're from Southwestern Ontario. It was, pretty far detached for us to, see that sort of challenge that they were facing in sort of the political sphere. And so being able to see that up close really gave us an understanding of what scouting, what the effects on scouting was or were for that sort of during that sort of time. And it was a really meaningful experience, mostly because my friend got that award, but also because I got to experience scouting in a totally different way. So like I said, I highly encourage, whether it's the World Scout Moot or the World Scout Jamboree in 2027 or any other, international event that you'd like to go to, I highly encourage you to do so and to visit scouts.ca /international, I believe is the,
I'll get the right link
is
in
the
the show
link.
notes.
Yeah. And to to check out what opportunities there are and get involved in international scouting too. If you're a youth listener, there's the International Youth Delegate program, which allows you to attend different conferences and different events as a youth to sort of gain that experience. And oftentimes the cost is covered by Scouts Canada.
Nice.
For example, I had the excellent opportunity of participating in the Inter-American Leadership Training, but I also had the opportunity to go and attend the coronation of King Charles III. And also attended the Bangladesh conference on sustainable development goals in scouting. So there's a lot of opportunity for youth and for scouters and for anyone in scouting to sort of get involved in international scouting, get involved at the local or national or council or international level in scouting and make a difference in the lives of your fellow scouts.
Absolutely. And take extra knickers with you when you go.
Exactly.
Alrighty. Well, that is all the time I have because work is going to have me on a call here in 3 minutes time. I don't have any shout outs for this episode, but I do have a little bit of an apology to offer to 3 people. That would be Zane, Ryder, and Sai. I just now checked to see that you had requested some stickers. And so Zane, Ryder, Sai, I will be sending those out this week with my apologies. But thank you for putting in those requests. I do have a few stickers left, so that's all right. And Ethan, if you want one, I can shoot one your way too. Just drop me a mailing address by email or something there. And in the meantime, sir, thank you so much for reaching out, for coming on. I know we had bounced around a couple of other topic ideas. Might have to have you back on to go over some of them. But for now, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and thank you out there for listening. And until next time, be prepared.